Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a really fundamental concept in React Forms, the difference between controlled and uncontrolled components. It all comes down to one question. Who's really in charge of the data, React or the browser itself?
Okay, so let's dive right in with the central question. When a user types into a form field, where does that information actually live? Who is the single source of truth? You've basically got two choices. Does the data live in the browser's DOM, the way HTML has always worked? Or is it managed directly by your React state? And believe me, this one decision changes absolutely everything.
And right there, that's the core tension. See, a regular HTML input is perfectly happy managing its own state. The DOM knows what you typed. But React also wants to be in control of the state. So when those two get out of sync, well, that's when you get those weird, unpredictable bugs. And that's the exact problem these two patterns are designed to solve.
So let's really unpack this whole source of truth problem and take a look at the two very different ways that React lets you handle it. First up, controlled components. Now, a great way to think about this approach is to imagine a smart thermostat. It's not just reporting the temperature, it's actively managing it, constantly making adjustments. It's all about precise, continuous control.
So the crucial point here is that with a controlled component, React completely dictates what that input shows at all times. The input field itself has no say in the matter. It's basically just a mirror, reflecting exactly what React state tells it to be. React is the boss.
And what you're seeing here is this constant feedback loop in action. React's state sets the value. The user tries to type something. That fires an onChange event. We use that event to update the state in React, and then the component re-renders. This cycle repeats on every single keystroke. It's a very predictable, two-way data flow.
And here's what that looks like in the code. That value prop, that's the whole magic trick right there. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. By setting the value prop, you are forcing that input to display whatever is in your React state every single time the component renders.
So, when would you actually use this? Well, it's perfect anytime you need to know what the user is doing as they're doing it. Think about instant form validation that shows an error message right away, or maybe a character counter, or a password strength meter. If you need to react in real time to what a user is typing, you need a controlled component. Now for the other philosophy. This approach is much more of a delegator. It's hands-off. Think of it like a classic old-school thermometer. It'll tell you the temperature if you ask, but it has no intention of changing it.
With uncontrolled components, React basically takes a step back. It might give the input an initial value to start with, but after that, it completely trusts the DOM to handle its own business. React isn't tracking every little change, it just pops in at the end and asks for the final result.
And just look at how much simpler this data flow is. The user types, and the DOM just does its thing. React doesn't re-render, it doesn't do anything. Until you need the data, maybe when the user clicks Submit. Then, and only then, React reaches directly into the DOM using a ref and says, hey, what's the final value here? The key prop here is totally different. It's default value. And that name is very intentional. It tells React, hey, set this as the starting value on the very first render, and then just walk away. You let the DOM take over, and we use that ref to get a direct line to the element later on. So this is your go-to for really simple fire and forget forms, like a basic login page where you only care about the username and password when the user hits submit. It's also great for performance, especially on huge forms, because you're avoiding all those re-renders. And here's a big one. File inputs in React are always uncontrolled. You just can't control them for security reasons.
Okay, so we have these two completely different philosophies. How in the world do you decide which one to use? Well, it really just comes down to a few key trade-offs.
This table really breaks it down nicely. It's a classic battle between predictability and performance. Controlled gives you this beautiful, predictable data flow, where React always knows what's going on, but it comes at the cost of re-rendering on every keystroke. Uncontrolled is way more performant because it avoids those renders, but you have to manually go and pull the data from the DOM when you need it. So if there's one aha moment to take away from all this, it's this. The difference between value and default value isn't just a name, it's the entire philosophy. Value means React is the micromanager. Default value means React just gives a suggestion on day one and then trusts its employee, the DOM, to do the job. All right, let's finish up by looking at some common mistakes this whole thing can cause, because honestly, understanding these will save you hours and hours of debugging time. Seriously, that first one, the read-only input, it's a rite of passage for every single React developer. You use the value prop because you want to control the input,
but you forget to provide an on-change handler. So the user types, but you never update React's state. So on the next render, React just forces the input back to what the state says it should be, making it look like it's locked. It's React enforcing its single source of truth rule, right in your face.
Ultimately, choosing the right approach really just means deciding on the right leadership style for your form state. Do you need that hands-on, real-time control of a micromanager, or is it better to delegate the work to the DOM and just check in at the very end? The answer to that question will define your entire form's architecture.